Good morning, everyone, and it's time for another video. This time we're going to make this sign-in page. And so this is the page we navigate to when we click the login button. And, you know, something that jumps right out at you is these text fields here. There's 3 of them. They're pretty much the same. And so I hope by now you can guess that this is going to be a component. All this here will be one component, and we'll have 3 of them. And we'll have this form. This whole thing will be a form. Each one of these inputs will be a component, and then we'll have this button. And it's kind of fun. This video might be a little bit longer. We'll see. But let's get started. So here we are. We've just got this sign-in page, and it doesn't have anything on it. Now each one of those fields is going to keep track of some stuff, right? And so you can see as I type in this field, the characters are being remembered and inserted into that text input. And the reason for this is that we're storing those values in state. So when you see this kind of thing, when you see the screen updating and remembering stuff, whether that's a button click or a text input or whatever, that's usually a good sign that there's some state. And this is state that we're going to want to keep not in the parent, because you know the parent doesn't need to keep track of that stuff. The app doesn't need to be aware of that stuff just yet. This is just for this component to remember. Once I hit this submit button, we'll have a logged in user hopefully, and then the rest of the app should know about it. But for now, we're going to want to just keep that in a local state. So I think what we're going to do is refactor this component to be a stateful component. And so this will be called sign-in page, and it's going to have some state. Maybe I'll start just by having on this state, we'll have a username, and we'll have an email, and we'll have a password, and we're going to have an errors object. So that'll keep track of some errors, and you'll see if I try to submit this with an incorrect email, we get this nice error message that says, no, that's not a cool, that's not a good user. That's not the information we want. And that error message could be more specific and helpful, but that it's there is important. And so I'll also show you how to create a form validation. And for now, we'll just make a file called validate login. I'll show you how to do that in a sec. So we've got this errors. The validation will handle our errors. For our main page, what we're going to have is we're going to have a div with some styling, and we're going to have I'm going to go ahead and give it a form container, which will be a flex box that'll hold all these elements. And inside there, we'll have a form. And inside that form, we're going to have this thing called a text field. And we're going to have 3 of them, but we need to write those. So this is going to be another component called a text field, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. You can see I've already written this, but I want to write it with you. So let's write that component. And this is going to be a presentational component, right? So this will be, oops. Wrong file. This will import React, and we'll import that styling. And text field. And we'll say this will be a stateless functional component, right? As I mentioned, just a presentational component. And so we'll return this, we'll export it, this text field, and in here we're just gonna return some JSX. And this will be a div, and inside that div we'll have an input. Oops. All right, let's try this again. I'm gonna have to bring make my Emmet work for the money, and let's try that input again. There we go. There's our input. And so our input is going to have a class name that is actually gonna look a little complicated, and maybe it's a good idea to just hold off on that for now, because our input, we're going to want to change that styling on as to whether there's an error or not. It's also going to have an onChange function, so every time someone enters something, this will trigger. And this function we can call handle change, and we'll call it, let's actually call it onChange, and we will pass in the event to this. And for now, let's actually just write this as a template literal, and we'll just give it that text input class name for now. Now this onChange, you can see is not defined, so I'm gonna define it, and I'm gonna then pass it in as a prop in this text field. And we'll come back and do the rest of this in a second. So in our sign-in page now, we've got this text field, and we'll import text field from, let's see, where's it going to come from? It's going to come from up, in, there. So we go up to and into components. Now we've got this text field, and we can keep working on our sign-in page. So this text field is going to want to take in a bunch of props, and it's going to have a value. It's going to have whether it's required or not. It's going to have a name for this prop, or for this text, this input will have a name. This input element will have a name. And there's that onChange function, which will pass in from the parent, as we've done before with other update sort of parent functions. and we're going to have an error message. And this is that. So you can see we've got our username. There's our errors. Our next, we'll have a placeholder. So this will be what the message that'll display when. And actually, we could just say, please enter a username. So you can see username and errors are not defined, but we can pull those in off of state. So we'll say username, and let's go ahead and pull in email, password, errors. So we'll pull all the stuff off of state that we need. And we'll make 3 of these text fields. And you can see, I think you see where I'm going with this. We're going to use email here. This will be email. Please enter an email. And we'll say password. And change this to password. All right, so now we've got those 3 different text fields. Each one has a different value, username, email, and password. Those values are what is going to be updated with this onChange function. And we'll see that in a second, but first, let's also add a button, and let's give that a little bit of text, and then we'll give it a class name of submit button, and we'll give it a type of submit. So when we click this button, we'll submit the form, and it will take all these. We'll have this. We'll actually have an onSubmit prop, and we'll call that this.handle submit. So you can see we've got these 2 functions we need to write here. We've got 2 methods, handle change and handle submit. And we can say this.handle change is going to be a arrow function, right? We're going to pass that in. So we want to make sure we maintain, and we don't need this there. Handle change is going to be this.handle change is still going to be an arrow function. And it's kind of simple, but you know, it's one of these situations where by understanding a little bit of syntax that you may not immediately know, you can save yourself a lot of pain. We can just say this.setState. We'll update state with, so we'll update the username, right? Username. But we want to do this dynamically, right? So we want to update it whether this.handle change is coming from this text field or this text field or the other text field. So we can pull that off of this event that gets sent from our text field. We're sending in the change event every time this input changes. So in our sign-in page, we'll have access to that event, and we can just say update target.name. So the name, this name right here, we'll update that in state with e.target value. And that's all we need to do for our handle change. And that should work. And let's just go ahead and check out our new page here. So I'll open up a oopsie daisy. What did I do here? iframe in my text field CSS. Can't resolve. Oh, I lost my Mario Cloud. There we go. I accidentally deleted some stuff and now I'm paying for it. All right, there we go. Now we're good. We go to our login page and we see there's our text fields. And if I type name in here, you can see it's updating it. It's updating state here, pulling that state in and passing it back down into, oh no, that's actually not happening yet. We're updating the state here, but we're also updating, the state here, right? So we call this onChange method, and as we update our state here, we pass that value back down into here. Now when we hit handle submit, we can also update our app. And let's go ahead and add some styling to this, both the sign-in page and the text field. And you know, in the interest of time, and since this isn't a CSS class, I'm just gonna go over it with you and let you get it from the repo, or just pause the video here and type it out. We've got a sign-in background. It's the same as the main background, basically, where we've got this flex container that covers the whole screen and it's got a linear gradient. For a form container, again, we've got this flex box, and we're specifying some widths and some padding. And our submit button, we're just styling that submit button, you know, filling it for the width 100%. We'll fill it the full width of this flex box, and then some padding and alignment and stuff like that. And for the text field, we're gonna just wanna make sure we style that input container to be the full width of the text box, or of the enclosing flex box, and you know, just some styling basically in here. And now we've got text input and we've got text input error. So text input is going to be, you can see when we add a text input error, we're just changing the color of the text to red, adding that border. And so we can take a look at this and just see, oopsie daisy, I did something wrong. I think that's going to be on my sign-in page. I forgot to import. Sign-in page.css. All right, let's take a look. There we go. So now we're pretty much there. We're not seeing my placeholders. And the reason for that is, I pass in all these props, value, required name, onChange, error, placeholder, and in my text field, I'm not pulling them in yet. So let's go ahead and pull those in. So I'll give the onChange, error, I'm going to say text area, and we don't need that. That's for just me. So I'm going to pull in the unchange and the error, and then I'm just going to have this thing called rest. And this is pretty neat here. This is a thing that where this spread syntax, the 3 dots, let me bring in all the rest of the props, and then I don't have to write them all out. So I can just say rest, and now it's bringing in all those props. So even though I didn't write placeholder, right, it's bringing in, it's sort of a companion to destructuring, where we just bring in this whole chunk of props as rest, and now it's gonna pass all those props from sign-in page into my input, because these are basically all of the values you would want in an input component. So this error, you can see I pulled error and onchange off. And onchange we're already using, but this error we'll use to add that red styling, and we'll say error, if there's an error, let's add text input error, and if there's not, then let's not. And that's pretty straightforward, really. It looks a little complicated maybe at first, but this sort of ternary syntax, right, for your CSS is, you'll use it a lot once you really get rolling with React. And then I'm gonna, in here, say if there's an error, I wanna add this p tag. And in the P, we'll just display the error, and we'll use the class name of error text. Right, and so that's this error text. There's our text input error. I guess I don't need that there. That's just redundant. We'll just get rid of that. And there's our text field. Let's take a look at it. Just make sure it's doing what we want. Great. Now we're not going to generate any errors yet, because we haven't done a very important thing, which is to validate. So we're going to validate on submit. We've got our text fields. They're updating. We're using handle change. We haven't written handle submit yet. And handle submit is going to be another method. In this method, we're gonna do our form validation. So we're gonna again get this event from handle submit, and our event. Let's see. So we're gonna, first of all, we need to stop the page from refreshing which is the default behavior of a form submit. We don't want to refresh our whole app when this form gets submitted. And I'm gonna pull. Let's see. So in our state, we're going to have a username and an email and a password. We will have updated those using handle change. And we're going to take those values, and what I can do is actually make an object Don't have to, but we'll say username, email, password. So I'm getting them off state. I'm making a new data object just for the, just to make sure we're not modifying anything we don't want to modify. And then I'm gonna have a function called, and you know what? Let's just do our login. No, I think I'll use, yeah. We'll import this from validate login. So we'll write a special function out here. What I'm going to do is say validate login and pass in those values. And the return from that function is going to be our errors. So we'll hopefully be able to also log out those errors. Let's write that valid form validation now. So it's going to be a function, and I'm just going to export it from this file, which is going to take in those values like we just passed in, and we're going to try to return this error object. We're gonna, let's do one for email. So we'll say if there's nothing in the email thing, then we'll send back this error message. And let's actually do that for the username as well. So we'll say if not, wait, this should be values.email. If there's not values.username, then errors.username equals username required. And that's enough for the username. For the email, we'll say if there's no value, then that, and we'll say also else if and I'm just gonna go ahead and write this here. Errors.email equals invalid email address. So now in this if here, we're gonna put some regex, which I think I had mentioned previously is really useful for things like form validation and loading files. It's not something you really need to memorize. What you need is to have some regex at hand that can do what you need to do. So for instance, you might want to save this regex string I'm about to give you and use it later. That's really all I did. And it's so gnarly that I'm just gonna copy and paste it in here and go over with you, and you can pause it. Or just go to the next branch and get it. This regex string is just basically saying make sure there's some characters, and then make sure there's an @ sign, and then make sure there's some more characters, and then make sure there's a dot thing. And then we just say, take this whole regex string and test values.email to make sure that it's legit. And that's really all we need to do. We'll do a similar thing for password. We'll say if not values.password, then, and you know, this regex business, if it's, you know, if you want to go and learn more about all this stuff, I recommend it. It's actually an area that I'm a little negligent in ever having been interested enough to do more than just know how I need to use stuff. But that doesn't mean it's not something that everyone should know. It just means that I'm not that into it. You know, I'm plenty into it when I need it, but I've never felt the need with this whole 80-20 thing. I've never felt the need to fill my brain with memorizing it enough to be able to write it from memory. And so we'll just, in this one, we'll just check if the length of the password is greater than 6 or greater than 5. And we could probably put an error message here. It'll say password must be at least 6 characters. Right. And that's our error validation, right? So now we're checking to make sure that this form is working. Validate login is not defined in my sign-in page, so I'm going to import validate login from validate login. Now it's defined and we can check it out, and we'll just try and you know, actually just the fact, I think I know now why I didn't bother with the username, because just the fact that it's required is enough for that test. But so we'll say, and we'll just try that. Oh, our submit isn't doing anything. Why isn't our submit doing anything? Let's see. Look in our console, and we can see in our sign-in page we're getting stuff at 23 and 25. And there's 23, there's 25, so we should have an object at 25. Invalid email address. Password must be at least 6 characters. Now, before I fix this, can you guess what it is? In our sign-in page, we're running this form validation. The stuff is getting entered in, but the errors aren't appearing in my form as I want them to. And if you guessed or knew that I need to call this.setState and pass in all those things, right? Username, email, password. Errors, then you're right. Now, what we actually want to do is handle this. We may or may not have errors, right? So let's first check whether we have errors. So we'll say const no errors equals object.keys. Object.keys will give us the keys from an object. We returned an object from validate login, so we're going to look for the keys of errors, which was returned from validate login. And we're going to check and see if the length of that is 0. Then we'll have no errors. And we can say if no errors, then what we want to do is call this dot set state, and we're gonna say username is no longer a username. Email is no longer an email. Password is no longer a password. Errors is an empty object. Now, why? We're resetting state here, and I'm goofing somewhere. What did I do? Username, email, password, errors. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're calling this dot set state, and we're resetting everything, and then what we're going to do is call a function and pass those values up to the parent. So we'll say const current user equals this dot props. Now this current user is not defined. Set current user. Let's go back to our app, and there it is. This dot set current user. Right, we'd already written that. So now we're gonna pass those values up to the parent and hopefully receive them in the parent if there's no errors. If there are errors, then what we want to do is say, maybe we could say console.error errors. And we'll say this dot set state, and we'll just pass in values and errors. So we're going to send that errors object, and we're going to send in the username, email, and password, so that's still there and the user can see it. Let's see now if we're working. We'll say Chris thing password. Not a valid email. Oh, invalid email address, but I'm not seeing it. So I'm seeing we're getting our error, console.error, invalid email address. Our errors, let's see if we're, oh, there it is, errors dot email, password. And, you know, generally, one of the things that is just most important, you know, to remember is you're gonna make mistakes like I just made here on live TV, and you just got to stay calm. Be like, where's that? Where would I expect that to be? And follow the data. And there's my invalid email address. Let's fix it. And submit it. And there we go. And now it is working just as I would have hoped. Hooray! Now, yeah, I think that's going to be it for this video. It's kind of long. I hope that helped make, you know, illuminate a little bit about how to handle a form if you want to write your own form. Obviously, there's lots of libraries you can use to handle this stuff, but I think it's great to be able at least to do it yourself, so you know what's going on behind the scenes. And also is illuminating in terms of state. Now, I think next week I'm gonna make a video on how we might move this into Redux. Because you can see what we're doing is, you know, passing some stuff around in this app already. It's not very complicated, but we're passing there's a bunch of different, there's already some components that need access to shared information, and that shared information, I think, is the current user and the user info. It's okay to have it here in the app. It's not very complicated, but this is simple and maybe a good way to get started with Redux is just by having a straightforward sort of login state to that can be in Redux. So we'll do that next week. And until then, happy coding.